Good evening. Welcome to PMQs here on Sky News, where we'll be analysing and reviewing today's Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. David Cameron delved into the nation's imperial past for his latest assault on the Prime Minister's relationship with his Chancellor.
He said, a full term is a full term, and that is what it means. He said that when he went to Khartoum. Presumably he wanted to see the place where Gordon was murdered.
Well, in a moment, I'll hear verdicts on the leaders' performances from my political pundits this week. They are Catherine Baldwin and Tony Helm. Also, can the transition be stable and orderly? MPs from Labour and the Conservatives discuss that. And the source of it, Harold Wilson's favourite condiment, HP sauce, is under threat. And MPs are rushing to the rescue. And you can also post your comments on PMQs or any other political stories at my online diary. Go to Adam Bolton weblog at www.sky.com/Sky News and click on the link. First, though, the highlights of today's PMQs in Parliament.
3 weeks ago, I asked the Prime Minister about the crisis in children's hospitals. He said everything was fine. So can he explain why the Minister responsible for hospitals has resigned?
The Minister for Hospitals has certainly not resigned, as far as I'm aware, in respect of anything to do with children's hospitals.
The honourable member for Liverpool Wavertree was the Hospitals Minister, and she's resigned. I know things are bad, but the Prime Minister ought to know who's actually in his government. Now, last week, I asked about dangerous foreign criminals who were released instead of deported. We were told that in terms of those who'd committed serious offences, there were 79. Then we were told there were 90. This week we're told there are 150. Can he guarantee the number won't go up again?
The reason why the number has gone up is simply because, as the police investigate each one of these cases, then the details of those cases change. We will continue to work through the backlog, as I explained before, but I may just state to the right honourable gentleman now that as a result of the changes that are put in place, now all the cases are considered before release, and as I explained to him last week, there is a quite separate issue which we also have to deal with, which in the end is at the heart of this matter, and that is to make sure that those people that are convicted of a serious criminal offence and become foreign prisoners are deported, not retained in this country.
Well, if it's all going so well, why did he sack the Home Secretary? Yeah! Aren't the crises in the health service and the criminal justice system symptoms of a government that is paralysed? In the last 3 days, former ministers have been queuing up to tell the Prime Minister it's time to go. We've had the former Education Secretary, the Pension Secretary, the Terrorism Minister, the former Local Government Minister. They've all said the same thing. Presumably he appointed them because of their judgment. Why does he think he's lost their confidence?
I know he's not very comfortable with policy, but perhaps I could... because I thought we might be debating these types of issues, I asked my staff to look out what policies he had. I've found two. One on children's clothes and one on chocolate oranges. Other than that, he doesn't seem to have any.
But from that answer, we can see the Prime Minister won't even address the fact that he's losing the support of his party. Yeah, he lives in a world best summed up by the analysis that was given to him about his local election results by the Number 10 Planning Committee. The report was leaked, and this is what it said. I quote, "People were angry with Tony because they love him so much." and they are angry because they think he might go. I think that is what they call the view from the bunker. The issue of how long he stays in office is of key public interest. Let me remind him about the clearest pledge he gave about this issue. He said, a full term is a full term, and that is what it means. He said that when he went to Khartoum. Presumably he wanted to see the place where Gordon was murdered. Why doesn't he? I'm glad I put a smile on the face of the Deputy Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister unravel a mystery for us? Why doesn't he trust the Chancellor to take over the government now?
Sir Mingus Campbell. The Prime Minister knows it's not just DEFRA. There's trouble at the Home Office, and there's now from today's report from the King's Fund, trouble in the National Health Service. Might I ask the Prime Minister this? Following his reshuffle, does he accept that the people of the United Kingdom are much more likely to be motivated by appreciation of the government's performance rather than personalities, and that his ministers will be judged by their achievements, not their preference for him or the Chancellor? When will he do something about the National Health Service, about DEFRA, and also about the Home Office?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to offer my support to the Prime Minister for his decision to relieve the Deputy Prime Minister of departmental responsibilities. It's very good for all of us to see 9 years of unremitting incompetence finally rewarded. But I'd like my support to go a little further, because the Prime Minister has been criticised for allowing the Deputy Prime Minister to keep his salary and the vast perks of his office. But I'm with the Prime Minister on this. I think the new arrangement is an improvement, and that the Prime Minister is right, that it's better to pay the Deputy Prime Minister for not running a department than to pay him for running one.
This Deputy Prime Minister presided over 3 election victories. So I prefer President Hezza.
Well, in a moment we'll get the score lines from PMQs, but as you'll see from the breaking news there on the screen, in the world of football, it's bad news for England. Middlesbrough have gone down 4-0 to Seville in the UEFA Cup final. Not a particularly good augury for the Middlesbrough manager, Steve McClaren, who of course is going to be the England coach after the World Cup. Well, anyway, let's get back to the politics now. And Catherine Baldwin, political correspondent for Reuters, and Toby Helm, chief political correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, are here. Now, they're going to rate how the leaders did in a moment. But first of all, an exclusive. David Cameron was himself overheard giving his verdict on PMQs. Listen to this.
And we just had quite a good Prime Minister's questions. It was not a comfortable. Watch it on the telly. It was,
I heard it live.
He was having a bad time. He was having, his own MPs asked questions about cemeteries and going to St Helena, and it was all the sketch writers you could see were having a field day.
But he didn't know that his own health minister resigned.
I know, that was bizarre.
That was bizarre.
I was trying to think of the answers he's going to come up with, and I must say I didn't think of that one. That was really bad.
Well, a suitably modest verdict on his performance from David Cameron there, but how did he really do? Catherine Baldwin, how did you see it?
Well, I've given Blair 2.5, I've given Cameron 4.5 and Campbell 0.5.
Zero. So what? 2.5 for Blair, 4.5 for Cameron, and just a half for Campbell.
For me, Campbell.
You're pretty unambiguous, really. A success for David Cameron.
I think it was a success for David Cameron. I think Blair had to perform today, and Cameron, I think, outperformed him. Blair had to be first PMQ since the election result and first PMQ since his reshuffle, and he was really under the gun, and I don't think he gave the performance that his backbenchers were looking for.
Toby Helm, how about you? How did you see it?
I'm very similar to Catherine. I gave Blair 2, Cameron 4.5 and Min Campbell 1.
So very high marks again for Cameron. I mean, you felt he was on the button.
Yes, I thought this was the day, this is a week in which the story really has been whether power is transferring from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown. I thought there was a little sense today that actually that wasn't the story, and maybe we were seeing the beginning of power transferring from Tony Blair perhaps to David Cameron.
I mean, it struck me that, you know, so much of what goes on in the House depends on the sort of reception you get from your own side and from the backbenchers. And really there, Catherine, Labour pretty much were sat in silence throughout, didn't they?
They were very subdued. Normally they're very gung-ho, they're waving their papers, they're cheering, and they were very subdued today. And all the laughs, well, they laughed at Cameron's jokes, but Blair's attempts at jokes didn't get much of a laugh from his own backbenchers.
Now, just half a mark for poor old Saming. What went wrong there?
He just fluffed it, in my opinion. He hasn't been performing very well, but he again, I mean, he's on the ball with the issues. It's just his delivery, and PMQs is all about theatre, and I just don't think he performs.
Toby, how would you advise Saming Campbell to improve his performance, because he's not doing very well?
I think it's very difficult for him. I think he has to be a little bit more punchy in his delivery. He sounds so nervous when he's there, and the striking thing is that all the MPs behind him are sort of sitting with their mouths open, just hoping he'll get through. And he had that dreadful moment at the end today where he had to
think of notes to look up the word
He had to
Home
think of the
Office,
third department that he was referring to. And I suspect it's a question of confidence, but he does unfortunately look a little bit old and a little bit hesitant, and somehow he's got to overcome that. How he does it, I don't know.
And Catherine, we had for the first time, I think, in the 3 weeks that Tony Blair's been in trouble since the brief recess, we actually had John Prescott and Gordon Brown sitting on the front bench behind him. Did they help at all?
Having them there, I think, is helpful. They, you know, just to show that the government is there sitting together on the front bench. But Prescott isn't out the woods yet. The opposition is still going for him over his affair with Tracy Temple, and he's sitting there. He's a reminder of one of the problems that Tony Blair is still facing.
Toby, what could Tony Blair have done? I mean, bear in mind he's just lost an election, he's just conducted a cabinet reshuffle. I mean, what could he have done that he didn't do today?
Well, normally, it's very striking, I think. Normally, he's this supreme performer in that forum. He's absolutely brilliant. He didn't do disastrously badly, but he didn't have the people behind him. He didn't have his MPs cheering him on. His jokes fell flat. His delivery was slightly lacklustre. It was slightly limp, I thought. And by Blair's standards, it was just a sort of day off, I think. I don't think he's lost it. He's shown over the last 8-9 years that he is absolutely brilliant in that forum, and he'll be back again. But it was just a day off, I think.
I mean, he did seem to lose some of his normal technique, didn't he? I mean, he was saying and at some points he was actually addressing the people who questioned him rather than the speaker, just really blown off course.
Yeah, as Toby said, that is his forte. He is brilliant. He's generally brilliant in PMQs, and he just didn't seem to have the confidence. And he should be back on the front foot, but he looked very much on the back foot today.
What did you reckon to David Cameron's rather boastful verdict on question 2?
Well, I mean, that's what people seem to think he performed in that way, but his own self-confidence may make him seem rather smug.
Well, some good news, I have to tell you, for the Prime Minister tonight. Bill Clinton has sprung to his defence, saying that he supports the home team and that Tony Blair has been a great leader over the last 10 years. Well, that will cheer him up. But thank you very much, Catherine and Toby. And not really much doubt who's this week's Punch and this week's Judy. We've got, on the aggregate scores, we've got just 4.5 for Tony Blair. Very rare that he doesn't actually meet the half mark out of 10. 9 for David Cameron. And 1.5, I'm sorry, for Sir Mingus Campbell. So not a very good week for him. Well, coming up next, Gordon tells Tony not to do a Maggie. MPs will join me to decode the transition.
The largest repatriation operation ever undertaken in the continent of Africa.
There is still fighting going on up ahead of here.
This is a scene that utterly defies description.
They haven't been used to expressing an opinion openly.
We are about a mile inside Kosovo now.
Bring a swifter end to the long war in Angola.
Don't forget, we came in with the NATO forces and a new dawn possibly for this country. It's a bit early.
RTS Presenter of the Year, Jeremy Thompson, is live at 5 every weekday.
Pay in a cheque at other banks, and they'll keep you waiting days before you earn interest. But not at Lloyds TSB. We're the first and only bank to pay you interest from the day you pay in to the day your bills get paid. So you could earn over 150 days more interest.
Better leave the toasting to us. The new KFC Toasted Twister.
Clear Indoors transitions lenses automatically adjust to changing light outdoors and block harmful UV rays and glare. Transitions, healthier sight in every light.
Thousands of one-way fares from £29. Book by the 10th of May at BA.com.
If you're buying a car, you want to get the most for your money. Call the AA and you could get a low rate of just 6.2% APR typical. And with plenty of low repayment options, you can choose a monthly amount to suit your budget. So with the AA, you could afford an even better car than you thought. For a decision in minutes, call 0800 234 6000. That's 0800 234 6000 or visit theaa.com. Call now and you could also get a free 6-month AA car warranty.
With Moisture Control Compost, you get miraculous plant growth. Because as well as Miracle Grow plant food, it has aquacore fibres that store and release water when it's needed, taking the guesswork out of watering. So plants grow twice as big and more beautiful.
If you're losing interest in your bank, switch to Lloyds TSB.
The simplest ideas are always the best. Maybe that's why the Chrysler Grand Voyager, with stow-and-go seating and storage, has won the What Car Award for the best large MPV 2 years running.
Again, Maggie, 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 out, 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 the protesters used to cry back in the 1980s, and in the end she was pushed out, but not by them, by her own Conservative MPs. This week, Gordon Brown has warned Tony Blair that he could face the same fate if the stable and orderly transition isn't adhered to. Well, joining me now are Labour's John McFall and Michael Fallon from the Conservatives, who was a minister under Margaret Thatcher. John McFall, do you really think there's a possibility now of Tony Blair doing a Thatcher?
No, I don't think so. I think there will be this orderly transition. I think we're at a difficult time in the Labour Party at the moment because the questioner Blair Brown is causing instability. As Tony Blair said when he appeared at the Parliamentary Labour Party on Monday night, there's two categories. There's a first category of MPs, very small number of MPs, who never signed up to Tony Blair as Prime Minister. But there's the big category of concerned MPs, and I think that is an issue which he's recognised.
Michael Fallon, I mean, you were there. Did you get the same feeling that you got?
No, I do get exactly the same feeling, because by definition, if you don't choose the time of your leaving, then it's all going to end in tears. It's all going to end badly, and in the end, you're going to be forced out. If you don't plan this and get on with it, then you're going to be forced out in a way you don't want to be, and that's a problem we had to live with for about the next 10 years, this feeling that it was all handled extremely badly, and she did not go at a time of her own choosing.
I mean, John McFall, was there, do you think, an implicit threat from Gordon Brown saying that, you know, there could be an undignified and disorderly exit?
No, I don't think so, but I think at a time when the economy is strong, when the Labour Party are delivering, if we allow this drift to go on, then we have problems. And that's why I suggest, Adam, that both Brown and Blair should get together, have a private understanding and tell the world that they have this understanding. It's not up for discussion, but they have the understanding and both are content with the process of transition. At a stroke, that would take away David Cameron's argument today that he had at Prime Minister's Question Time.
You don't see it that way?
No, I don't. I mean, we thought they had an understanding, by the way, back in 1994, the fabled Granita Pact. We thought there was a plan. It's a cunning plan, but it won't work because, of course, it'll leak. Sherry will tell her hairdresser, whenever it is, you know, what date it's going to be. It'll leak out,
but the big
that simply won't work.
I mean, the big difference, it seems to me, to the Thatcher years is that we know who would succeed Tony Blair in a way that it was uncertain at the time that Thatcher.
But it's precisely because of that everybody now can see authority just draining away from the Prime Minister. And actually, above party politics, this is not in the country's interest. If Blair is going, if he said he's going to go, if he's lost his authority, then actually, in the country's interest, he ought to get on with it and go.
Adam, it is in the country's interest, and that's why I've suggested that. But the difference between now and Thatcher's time is enormous. Michael and his colleagues were trying to go up Downing Street to tell Mrs Thatcher she should stay and not listen to certain cabinet ministers. It was absolutely chaotic at that time. It's not just now. Tony Blair says he's going to go, and it's a matter of him and Gordon Brown reassuring the Parliamentary Labour Party and others that there is this understanding and they're content.
Well, it looks pretty chaotic from outside.
No, but if, for example, John McFall, they said, OK, next summer, that seems to be conventional wisdom at the moment, next summer, next autumn, the Prime Minister, is that good enough? Wouldn't that simply paralyse the party and paralyse the government, as Tony Blair suggested?
I think it would paralyse the party if Tony Blair came out with a date, and I think it could paralyse government. And that's why it's important that we do not have a date. So I'm robust in being against having a certain date to go. but I'm very much in favour of saying that Tony Blair will go, as he has said, in his time, to allow ample time for his successor to bed in.
This isn't going to work. You know, the Blair premiership is clearly ending.
Clearly,
sooner they end it, the better.
Well, all right. I mean, you say that, but you're Conservative, of course. You want to win the next election.
Well, we want to win.
Yeah, I mean, why are you so anxious to see the end of Tony Blair? I mean,
Because
presumably if Gordon Brown came in, he had the support of the Labour Party, that'd be good for the Labour Party, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, what would be good for the country is to have an end to all this uncertainty. You know, it's to passing this parcel from one man to the next. Let's get on with this. Blair is no longer has the authority. His authority's gone now. He said he's going. He's about to go. He should fix a date and get on with it.
Gordon Brown's been giving out some awards tonight. We've probably seen some pictures of that. But John McFall, what would change if Gordon Brown becomes the Labour leader and the Prime Minister? Why should things be any better for the Labour Party?
Well, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair are the architects of New Labour, and they set this process in motion in the late 80s, Adam, and it's gone its way through. I'm certainly one who is of the opinion that if Gordon Brown took over, then the policies that we are pursuing will be continued. And these are good policies.
But if the government's unpopular now and the policies are unpopular now, wouldn't that simply continue under Gordon Brown?
Well, the government's unpopular at the moment, but every government goes through a period of unpopularity. Think back to Mrs Thatcher in 1983. The suggestion was she was going to get toughed out in her neck. It didn't happen, and she went on to stronger things. So it's important that we ride these lows at the moment and ensure that we get back. But what we need to do as a Labour government is we've been in for 3 terms now. Could be interpreted that we're a bit tired. We need to have a vision for people to see how we will take the party and the country through the 4th term.
And Mike Fallon, not what you want, what you guess. When do you think the transition's going to happen?
I think it'll be sooner than we think. I think it could well be the end of this year or very early next year.
It's not for me to decide. I said to you, it's a private agreement. I'm not interested in when it is. I want the process of government to keep going, and if they do it that way, it will.
Thank you both very much indeed. You may be partial to a drop of the brown stuff yourself. I'm talking about HP sauce, of course, the Houses of Parliament's favourite condiment. Well, MPs from the Birmingham area are outraged that the Aston-based factory is, no pun intended, being outsourced to Holland. Birmingham MP Khalid Mahmood is leading the protest in Parliament with an early day motion here, and he joins me now. I mean, obviously there's a lot of tradition behind HP sauce, but there's also, of course, a question of jobs being lost.
Well, over 125 jobs are being lost, and this without any consultation with the workforce, without any consultation to the local authority or the Regional Development Agency. You know, there's not been an issue of the fact that we need to make more investments, we need to make a better plant output. None of those questions have taken place. Heinz took this company over a year ago, and at the first possible opportunity they had to be able to restructure in terms of the legal network that they had, they've just decided to close the whole thing down.
I mean, it's another symbol of kind of Midlands manufacturing biting the dust.
Oh, very, very much so, and I think that's why, and particularly the whole, this brand is sold to 69 countries across the world, and it thrives because it's a British brand. It thrives on the reputation of being the Houses of Parliament sauce, and now that's going to be manufactured in Holland.
The upside, of course, is that Worcestershire sauce is now going to be going back to Worcester to be made. But do you think, really, if it's not made in Britain, that it is genuine HP sauce?
Well, no, you know, it's like the old story of Guinness. It depends where it's made. In Ireland, it'll taste different to it does in Birmingham because the water content. And with foodstuffs like that, there is an issue of the local ingredients that are added to it, the quality of the water that's added to it actually makes a difference. And I think it will make a difference to the taste, and that's something that they can't take away from the area.
It's got a picture of the Houses of Parliament on it. HP, although it actually stood for the initials of the man who invented it, is generally taken to refer for Houses of Parliament. And of course, there's a very venerable Labour history, in particular with Harold Wilson.
Well, I say Harold Wilson was a great advocate of the sauce and actually used it. A lot of people in the Commons have used it. I've just come from the lobbies now, where I've got over 50 Labour members of Parliament signing, in addition to the earlier people who've signed the early day motion, within about 20 minutes. And there's a huge sense of feeling of losing this, our national symbol, really.
What about yourself? Are you partial to it?
I'm very much so. On Sunday morning's breakfast is a staple diet for me.
And finally, do you think there's any chance, obviously an early day motion is a way of protesting,
That's right.
any chance you think that you'll get Heinz to change their minds?
Well, I'm speaking to trade unions tomorrow. Early next week, I've got a meeting with the management of Heinz to try and look at that. And what I want to do is to see how we can support them to retain these manufacturing jobs in Birmingham, in Aston, in the West Midlands. And we want to do that and see whether they have an issue, whether they want to get additional investment to try and do that. We're quite supportive of that. I want a dialogue to make sure that we can do that.
Colin Mahmood, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid we're thumping the bottom of the bottle now. That's all for this week. Please join us again at the same time next week.
A pulse. The whole world has a pulse. Now, so does a toothbrush. New Oral-B Pulsar. The Oral-B experts have created a whole new kind of manual brush. Micro-pulse bristles pivot and pulse deep between teeth, helping you achieve a truly superior clean. Feel that? That's Oral-B Pulsar. Changing the way you brush forever.
Within the miles. Air France, making the sky the best place on Earth.
Work and play. They don't get on. But if you had the tools to get more done on the move, there's really no reason why they shouldn't. Make the most of now with mobile office solutions from Vodafone.
I'm a bit of a clean freak, and so perfect loo paper would be good.
I think Loo Rose cleansing balm sounds very hygienic, doesn't it?
Wow, that's going to be it's about time too, really, isn't it?
Feels kind of cootie.
The first toilet tissue ever with a unique cleansing balm. New Lotus Freshness.
You select the finest sand, pat it down gently, a few nicely weighted taps, and an expert lift off. But there's always some clever clogs who's gone one better.
Because there's always a massive movie. The movie always starts at 8 o'clock. And it's always a Sky Movies first. First Time Saturday, the very first run of our biggest and best movies, every Saturday at 8 on Sky Movies, which is why...
Coming up in Sky News at 10, the High Court ruling that 9 Afghan asylum seekers who hijacked a plane to Britain cannot be deported.
Everest Challenge. The British expedition prepares to pick the team that will head for the summit.
And we'll get a first look at the big stories making the morning's front pages.
First, though, the weather. Here's Francis.
Mist. As seen by Qatar Airways passengers, your 5-star airline.
Well, a few thunderstorms have developed over Belgium and the borders with France, and there has been some over Oxfordshire that have moved across to the West Country. So for some people, it's going to be a torrential downpour tonight. These ones coming across the southeast, these ones going into the West Country. Although for the vast majority of Britain, as you can see, it's hardly been a cloud in the sky. And it was a beautiful day. So for most people, it'll be dry. But some people are going to be caught. You see this coming across now to London, and that going across to Bristol and beyond. So some unlucky few are going to be very wet.
Tomorrow, though, will start clear after a mostly dry night for most of us, and sunshine, of course. And the sun gets quite high in the sky, as you probably witnessed today. It feels pretty warm. Up in locally, I think it'll be 22, 23, 24.